The observation deck of Helia 7 glowed with the amber light of the binary stars it orbited, casting long shadows across the worn metal floor. Senna stood at the viewport, her silver-green skin catching the light like polished jade. Her eyes solid black, without visible pupils, reflected the twin suns as she watched. A cargo vessel dock at the station's outer ring. She didn't belong here. The thought came unbidden, as it did every morning since her arrival 3 months ago. Once, she had commanded a battalion of the finest warriors in the Viridian clans. Now she stood guard over merchants and smugglers, on a forgotten trading outpost at the edge of civilized space. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice interrupted her thoughts. Senna turned to find a human male approaching, his arms full of shipping containers that wobbled precariously. He had warm brown skin, dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. That smile was happening now, directed at her, despite the fact that most beings on this station went out of their way to avoid her gaze. The view, he clarified, nodding toward the viewport. First time I docked here, I stood at this exact spot for an hour. My crew thought I'd gone space mad. The stars are stars, Senna replied, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her people. They care nothing for our admiration. Maybe not, he agreed, shifting the containers. But that doesn't make them less beautiful. He extended one hand awkwardly around his cargo. Tobias read, "Most people call me Toby." Senna regarded his hand for a moment before clasping it briefly. His grip was firm, his palm calloused from work. Senna? Just Senna? Just Senna. He grinned wider. Woman of mystery. I like it. One of his containers started to slip, and he juggled them quickly. I'd better get these to my shop before I drop something expensive. But maybe I'll see you around? Station's not that big. She watched him walk away, his gait confident despite the awkward load. Something about the easy way he spoke to her, without fear or aggression, unsettled her more than any threat could have. Her communicator chirped. Senna, report to Administrator Cross's office immediately. She touched the device at her collar. Acknowledged. The administrator's office occupied a prime location near the station's central hub, with viewports that offered a panoramic view of the docking rings. Cross himself was a thin human male with pale skin and eyes that darted constantly, as if expecting attack from every shadow. There's a situation developing, he said without preamble, pulling up a holographic display. We've received a distress signal from the merchant vessel Prosperity. Pirates. They're demanding we allow them to dock and resupply, or they'll destroy the ship. Senna studied the display. The Prosperity hung in space, beyond the station's defensive perimeter, surrounded by 3 smaller attack craft. How many aboard the merchant vessel? 42 crew and passengers. Cross wrung his hands. We can't let pirates dock here. It would set a precedent. But if we refuse, you will negotiate, Senna stated. They want supplies, not bloodshed. Bloodshed complicates business, and if negotiations fail, then you will pay me to ensure the passengers reach safety. Cross's eyes narrowed. I've heard stories about your people, about what you can do. Just remember, you work for me now. You follow my orders. Senna's expression didn't change. I remember who signs my contract. The negotiations lasted 2 hours. Senna spent the time preparing, checking her weapons, reviewing the station's defensive protocols. She was in the security office when the alert came through. They're boarding the Prosperity, the security officer announced, his voice tight. Cutting through the airlock. Senna was moving before Cross's authorization came through. She took a shuttle from the station, piloting it manually toward the besieged merchant vessel. The pirates had indeed breached the hull. She could see figures moving through the corridors on her scanner. She docked at the ship's secondary airlock, using her security codes to override the emergency lockdown. The corridors were chaos, passengers fleeing in panic, crew members trying to maintain order, and the harsh crackle of energy weapons. Senna moved through the confusion like water flowing downhill, inevitable and unstoppable. She found the first group of pirates in the cargo bay, 3 of them ransacking shipping containers. They saw her and raised their weapons. She was faster. Her blade, a curved weapon of folded metal, inscribed with the honor marks of her clansang as it left its sheath. The fight lasted seconds. The pirates fell, wounded but alive. Senna didn't kill unless necessary. That philosophy was why she'd been exiled in the first place. She found more passengers huddled in the mess hall, guarded by a pirate with a nervous trigger finger. Senna disarmed him through a ventilation shaft, dropping behind him and rendering him unconscious with precise pressure to his neck. "Everyone to the escape pods," she commanded the passengers. Now. They fled, and she moved deeper into the ship. The bridge was where she found Tobias. He was backed against the navigation console, hands raised, facing 2 pirates with weapons drawn. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, and his usual easy smile was nowhere to be seen. "The safe combination," one pirate demanded, "or we start breaking fingers." "I'm just a passenger," Tobias said, his voice remarkably steady. "I don't know anything about safes. Lying will cost you." Senna stepped onto the bridge. "You will leave, now." Both pirates spun toward her. One fired immediately. She moved sideways, the energy bolts scorching the bulkhead behind where she'd stood. Her blade flashed twice. Both weapons clattered to the floor, along with the hands holding them still intact, but numbed and useless. The pirates fled. Tobias lowered his hand slowly, staring at her. "You came. It is my job. Right? Your job." He touched the cut on his forehead, wincing. "Still, thank you." She moved to the bridge controls, activating the ship's communication system. "All passengers to escape pods. Pirates are retreating. You have 5 minutes before their ships return." Tobias pushed away from the console. "What about you?" "I will ensure everyone reaches the pods." "That's not what I asked." They worked together, herding the last stragglers toward safety. Tobias moved with surprising efficiency, his earlier fear replaced by focused determination. He helped an elderly woman navigate a ladder, carried a child who'd frozen in panic, all while keeping up a steady stream of reassuring words. Senna found herself impressed. The last escape pod launched just as the pirate ships returned. Senna and Tobias ran for the final pod, but the ship shuddered violently. An explosion somewhere aft. The corridor buckled, and suddenly the pod bay door was jammed. Tobias pulled at the manual release. "It's stuck." Senna examined the mechanism. The explosion had warped the frame. She could force it, given time, but time was something they didn't have. The pirates would breach the ship again any moment. She made a decision. Grabbing Tobias's arm, she pulled him toward the maintenance tunnels. "This way." They ran through narrow passages, the ship groaning around them. Behind them, she heard voices the pirates had boarded again. They reached an auxiliary airlock, but as Senna activated it, alarms blared. Administrator Cross's face appeared on a nearby screen. "Senna, what are you doing?" "Escaping." "The pirates. You're conspiring with them." Cross's voice rose in pitch. "I knew it. Your people sent you here as a spy. Security, seal that airlock." The door slammed shut before Senna could react. Magnetic locks engaged with heavy THUDS. Tobias looked at her in disbelief. "Is he serious?" "He is frightened. Frightened beings make poor decisions." "That's one way to put it." Tobias tried the door controls, but they were locked out. "So what now?" Senna surveyed their prison. The auxiliary airlock was small, barely large enough for both of them to stand comfortably. Supplies lined one wall: emergency oxygen, repair kits, ration packs. A single viewport showed the stars wheeling slowly as the ship drifted. "Now," she said quietly, "we wait." Tobias slid down the wall to sit on the floor. After a moment, he laughed a short, sharp sound. "Of all the ways I imagined this day ending, locked in an airlock with a warrior goddess wasn't on the list. I am no goddess." Figure of speech. He patted the floor beside him. "Might as well get comfortable. Something tells me we're going to be here a while." Senna remained standing for several seconds before, reluctantly, joining him on the floor. Their shoulders nearly touched in the confined space. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. Indifferent to the two beings trapped together, separated from their worlds by choice and circumstance, united by chance and the beginning of something neither yet understood. The auxiliary airlock had grown colder over the past hour. Senna could see Tobias's breath forming small clouds in the air, though her own physiology regulated temperature more efficiently. She noticed him rubbing his arms and, without comment, adjusted the emergency heating unit she'd rigged from the repair supplies. "Thanks," he said, holding his hands toward the warmth. "You know, for someone accused of being a pirate conspirator, you're remarkably helpful." "The accusation is illogical. If I worked with pirates, I would not have wounded 4 of them. You'd think Cross would realize that." Tobias leaned his head back against the wall. "But logic isn't his strong suit. Fear is. He sees threats everywhere, even when they don't exist." Senna studied him in the dim light. "You are not afraid, of you?" He met her black eyes without flinching. "Should I be? Most are. Most haven't seen you risk your life to save strangers." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm a pretty good judge of character. Comes with being a merchant. You learn to read people quickly, or you get cheated blind. And what do you read in me?" Tobias considered the question seriously. Someone carrying a weight they didn't choose. Someone who knows what it's like to be misjudged. He paused. Someone lonely. The accuracy of his observation unsettled her. Senna looked away, toward the viewport. "My people value strength above all else. Compassion is considered weakness. When my commander ordered me to execute civilians who surrendered during a raid, I refused. For that refusal, I was stripped of my rank and exiled. You did the right thing. The right thing cost me everything. My position, my honor, my family." Her fingers traced the honor marks etched into her blade's hilt. "In my culture, a warrior without a clan is no warrior at all." Tobias was quiet for a moment. "My parents died when I was 15, he said finally. Reactor failure on a mining station. After that, I bounced between foster families, none of whom wanted a grieving teenager. So I lied about my age, got work on a cargo hauler, and never looked back." He flexed his scarred hands. "I built my trading business from nothing. No family, no connections, just me and whatever I could carry. So I understand, maybe a little, what it's like to lose everything and have to start over." Their eyes met in the dim light. For the first time since her exile, Senna felt something she'd thought lost recognition. Not of her as a warrior, but as someone equally adrift. A metallic clang echoed through the ship, followed by voices. Senna was on her feet instantly, blade in hand. She moved to the airlock door, pressing her ear against the cold metal. The voices grew louder, speaking Viridian. "Impossible," she whispered. "What is it?" Tobias stood, reading the tension in her body. "My people? They have found me." The airlock's external controls beeped. Someone was overriding the lock from outside. The door began to slide open, revealing the corridor beyond and the figures waiting there. 6 Viridian warriors stood in formation, their silver-green skin marked with battle scars. their armor bearing the insignia of the clans. At their head stood a male Senna recognized immediately. "Vex," she breathed. He stepped forward. Taller than Senna by half a head, his shoulders broad with muscle. They had trained together since childhood, fought side by side in a dozen campaigns, shared everything warriors could share. Once she had thought they might bond permanently. That was before her exile. "Senna of the Fallen House," Vex announced formally. "You are summoned to face justice for your crimes against the clans. I have already been judged and exiled. There is no further justice to claim. The elders disagree. Exile was mercy. But you have shamed us further by taking work among lesser species, acting as their servant." His black eyes flicked to Tobias with undisguised contempt. "You demean yourself and all Viridians. I survive with honor. There is no honor in what you have become." Vex's hand moved to the elaborate blade at his side, a weapon far larger than Senna's, inscribed with kill marks that spiraled down its length. "The station administrator was easily convinced to give you to us. He considers it payment for our restraint in not destroying his station." Tobias stepped forward, ignoring Senna's warning glance. "She saved 42 lives today. What have you done besides threaten unarmed people?" Vex's attention fixed on Tobias with predatory focus. "The human speaks. Tell me, small one, do you understand what she is?" "She is a killer. She has ended more lives than you have years. I understand she's worth 100 of you." The other warriors tensed, hands moving to weapons. Vex held up one hand, stopping them. Then, surprisingly, he laughed a harsh, barking sound. "You are brave for prey." He returned his attention to Senna. "I challenge you to ritual combat, here and now. Defeat me, and we leave. Lose, and you return with us to face execution. Your human friend dies either way, for his disrespect. No." Senna's voice was flat. "I accept your challenge, but the human goes free regardless of outcome. He is not part of our ways." "Everything is part of our ways," Vex replied, echoing words that had been drilled into them both as children. "But very well. Your mercy will be your downfall, as it has always been." He drew his massive blade. "Ready yourself." Senna moved to the center of the corridor, away from Tobias. She drew her own blade, the lighter weapon seeming fragile in comparison to Vex's. The ceremonial blade had been forged on her naming day. The metal folded 10,000 times, inscribed with prayers to the warrior gods. It was the last physical connection to her previous life. Vex attacked without warning, his blade sweeping in a horizontal arc meant to bisect her. Senna ducked beneath it, countering with a thrust toward his midsection. He blocked, and the clash of metal rang through the corridor. They fought in the traditional style, each move prescribed by centuries of ritual combat. Vex had always been stronger, but Senna had been faster. Now, after months of exile without proper training, she felt the difference. Her reactions were slower. Her muscles, though still formidable, had lost their fighting edge. Vex drove her backward, step by step. His blade moved in patterns she recognized, techniques they had practiced together countless times. He was playing with her, she realized, demonstrating his superiority. "You have grown weak," he said, pressing his advantage. "Soft, like the beings you protect." Senna said nothing, conserving her breath. She tried to feint, but he saw through it easily. His counterstrike nearly took her head off. She stumbled, and he kicked her in the chest, sending her sprawling backward. Tobias shouted something, but she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. She rolled aside just as Vex's blade crashed down where she'd fallen, leaving a deep gouge in the metal floor. This was how it would end. She had known it from the moment Vex appeared. He was too strong, too skilled, and she was too worn down by exile and isolation. Vex raised his blade for the killing strike, both hands gripping the hilt. The other warriors began chanting a death prayer, meant to honor a fallen opponent. Tobias moved. He wasn't fast, wasn't trained, wasn't even particularly coordinated. He simply threw himself between Senna and Vex with desperate, stupid bravery. "No!" Senna screamed, struggling to rise. Vex's blade was already descending. He tried to redirect the strike, surprised by the human's intervention, but momentum carried the weapon forward. In that split second, Senna made a decision that would change everything. She threw her blade to Tobias. "Defend yourself." He caught it instinctively, bringing it up in a graceless block. It had no technique, no skill, only pure survival instinct. Vex's heavy combat blade met Senna's ceremonial weapon with devastating force. The sound was unlike anything Senna had ever heard, a high, crystalline note that seemed to come from the metal itself, as if the blade were singing. Then came the crack, sharp and final as breaking bone. Senna's blade shattered. Not chipped, not broken cleanly, but utterly destroyed. Fragments of sacred metal exploded outward, glittering in the corridor lights like stars being born and dying simultaneously. The pieces fell in slow motion, each one carrying away a piece of her past, her identity, her connection to everything she had been. Vex stumbled backward, his own weapon ringing from the impact. The other warriors stood frozen, their chanting cut off mid-word. Tobias knelt on the floor, blood running from a dozen small cuts where fragments had struck him. The hilt of Senna's blade remained in his hand, but the weapon itself was gone, reduced to glittering dust on the metal floor. The silence stretched impossibly long. "You ... Vex's voice shook, something Senna had never heard before. "You destroyed a soul blade." In Viridian culture, a warrior's ceremonial blade was more than a weapon. It was forged with their naming, inscribed with their achievements, carried their honor. To break such a blade in combat was considered impossible. To witness it happen was an omen of catastrophic proportions. "This is wrong," one of the other warriors whispered. "The gods have spoken." Silence. Vex snapped, but uncertainty flickered across his face. He looked at the scattered fragments, then at Senna, then at Tobias, still kneeling with the useless hilt. "This changes nothing." "She still faces judgment. Does it change nothing?" Senna rose slowly to her feet. "Or are you afraid of what it means?" Vex's hand tightened on his blade. For a moment, Senna thought he would attack anyway. Omens and tradition be damned. But the other warriors were backing away, their faces showing the superstitious fear that ran deep in their culture despite their warrior training. "We will report this to the elders," Vex said finally. "They will decide what it means." He pointed at Senna. "Your death is delayed, not forgiven. The clans have long memories." He turned and strode away, his warriors following quickly. Within moments, they had disappeared down the corridor, leaving only the sound of their heavy footsteps echoing into silence. Senna went to Tobias, kneeling beside him. His hands were cut, blood dripping onto the blade hilt he still held. She gently took it from him, staring at the broken weapon. "I'm sorry," Tobias said, his voice rough. "I didn't mean to. I just couldn't watch him kill you. You broke more than my blade." Senna touched one of the larger fragments on the floor. "You broke the chain that bound me to my past. I do not know if that is liberation or damnation. Maybe it's both." She looked at him then, this human who had interrupted a ritual combat, who had caught her blade and shattered her history, who was bleeding because he had chosen to stand between her and death. "Why?" she asked simply. Tobias met her eyes. "Because someone who fights for strangers deserves someone to fight for them. Because you're worth saving. Because ... He paused, then continued quietly. because I couldn't imagine a universe without you in it. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Senna realized her hand had found his, her fingers intertwining with his bloodied ones. The touch felt more intimate than anything in her warrior past, a connection forged not through battle, but through something infinitely more fragile and infinitely stronger. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their dance. But for Senna, everything had shifted. The old constellations of her life had shattered along with her blade, and in the glittering fragments, she glimpsed the possibility of something new. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "This is Helia 7 control. We're sending a retrieval shuttle. Stand by." Tobias stood, offering Senna his hand. She took it, allowing him to help her up despite not needing the assistance. "What happens now?" he asked. Senna gathered the fragments of her blade carefully, placing each piece in a pouch at her belt. "Now we return to the station. I will file my report. Administrator Cross will likely terminate my contract. And then?" She looked at him, this human merchant who had somehow become the most important person in her fractured universe. "I do not know. For the first time since my exile, the path ahead is unclear." "Unclear isn't always bad," Tobias said, still holding her hand. "Sometimes it means there are possibilities you haven't imagined yet." The shuttle arrived, and they left the prosperity behind. As they traveled back to Helia 7, Senna found herself less afraid of the unknown than she had been in months. The blade was broken, the old ways shattered, but perhaps, just perhaps, that meant she was finally free to forge something new. Something that belonged only to her and the man sitting beside her, whose hand remained warm in hers as they flew toward an uncertain future among the indifferent stars.